So if you've been stressed out because you have a pre-construction property that's closing soon and you're thinking about walking away from your purchase, there's something that I need you to know. You cannot simply just walk away. So if you don't close on your pre-construction condo, what's the worst thing that happens? You just lose your deposit, right? That is wrong. That's actually the best case scenario. And what comes after that is where things can get very ugly, including lawsuits, judgments, and even your ability to finance any other purchases in Canada, including a house, a car, and even credit cards. Hi, I'm Kyle Dovigi, real estate broker and the guy behind condomillionaire.com, and I help people make smart investment decisions with their properties. And I want to be upfront here. I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. And if you're genuinely considering not closing on a pre-construction purchase, then talk to an experienced real estate lawyer before you do anything. But understanding the default process and what might happen, I hope will bring you motivation in order to pick up the phone before it's too late. So let's start with the biggest misunderstanding that most people make. You cannot just simply walk away from your pre-construction purchase. I know that sounds harsh, but that is the legal reality. When you signed your purchase agreement, you signed a legally binding contract, and not closing on it isn't just changing your mind. It's a breach of contract, which has a very specific meaning in Canadian law. A breach of contract happens when one party fails to do what they agreed to under a valid and legal contract. For a tenant, that's not paying rent. For a borrower, that's missing your loan payments. And for you, as a pre-construction buyer, that's not closing on the agreed upon date. But not closing isn't just a default. It's what is called a material default or material breach. That means it goes against the very heart of the contract. The entire purpose of your agreement was for you to buy that unit on a specific date. And if you don't, you haven't just missed a minor detail in the contract, you have broken the core of the deal. And a material breach gives the other side, the developer, the right to pursue real, legal, financial remedies and damages against you. So what happens next? Step 1, the developer is going to resell your unit. By law, the developer has an obligation here, and it's called a duty to mitigate damages. In plain English, that means that they have to make a reasonable effort to resell the unit rather than just letting it sit empty and racking up an enormous bill for you to cover later. Now, they can't sell it for $1 either when it's worth $500,000, but the word reasonable here gets stretched. The developer isn't trying to do you any favors here, and they're going to resell the unit in a way that's defensible in court. And in today's market, it usually means reselling your unit for a lot less than you agreed to pay. Which brings us to step 2, the damages get tallied up. This is the part that turns a lost deposit into something much, much bigger. Because now the developer adds up every single cost associated with your default. And I mean every cost. First, and the biggest, is the difference between your purchase price and what the unit resold for. For example, if you agreed to pay $900,000 and they could only resell it for $750,000, that's a $150,000 gap, which is now your problem. And second, resale and marketing costs. There's real estate commissions on the resale, legal fees for the resale transaction, marketing expenses to find a new buyer. All of that gets added up and put onto your bill. And third, carrying costs. Every single day that the unit sits unsold and empty, the developer is paying property tax, insurance, utilities, maintenance fees. Every one of those days adds up, and every one of those dollars gets tracked. Fourth, and this is the one that catches most people off guard, is interest. Most pre-construction contracts have a clause specifying an interest rate on unpaid amounts. And I have personally seen this calculated at 23% annually before. Think about that compounding on top of everything else while this process plays out for months or even years. And fifth, legal costs. But these are not just normal legal costs, because many agreements specify legal costs on what's called a substantial indemnity basis. It's a fancy way of saying that you could be on the hook for a multiple of the developer's actual legal fees. And lawyers are not cheap to begin with, let alone the cost to defend yourself in a lawsuit, which could add up to be tens of thousands of dollars more. So after all of that, the developer adds up every one of these categories and costs. If that total is greater than zero, and in today's market, it is, the developer now has a legal claim for damages against you. So how does this actually play out? How does a developer go from you didn't close to you owe us money? The first is timing. The developer can't even calculate the full damages until after they've resold the unit and it's closed. And that resale process can take months. So there's often a long gap of uncertainty before you even find out what that final number is. Second, there is a statute of limitations here. Generally, the developer has to act within 2 years from your closing date, though this does vary by province. And third, and this is an important point, you will not automatically be sued. It is entirely at the developer's discretion whether they think pursuing you is worth it. For some buyers, especially years ago, developers would calculate the cost of chasing someone down and decide it just wasn't worth the legal fees and just walk away with a relatively small shortfall. But here's what's changed, and changed dramatically. I am seeing developers pursue these claims now every single day in the GTA and even in Calgary. With hundreds of units not closing and significant price drops from the peak of the market, the dollar amounts involved, they can be staggering and large enough that pursuing buyers has become standard practice now, not the exception. Now, let's talk about what you could actually lose. And there's more here than people expect. The first hit, that's your deposit. That's a given. In nearly every case, if you fail to close, the builder has the contractual right to keep your entire deposit. And remember, pre-construction deposits are often 15 to 20% of the purchase price. On a $500,000 unit, that's $100,000 gone instantly with zero chance of getting it back. The second hit is the lawsuit for additional damages. Everything we just walked through, the resale shortfall, the carrying costs, the interest, the legal fees, this is on top of losing your deposit, not instead of it. And the third hit, that is to your credit. If a developer takes you to court and wins a judgment against you, that judgment can and very likely will be reported to credit agencies. A damaged credit score doesn't just sit there quietly, it follows you around. And it makes it harder for you to get approved for your next mortgage, harder to get a car loan, harder to get credit cards. And in some cases, it can even make renting an apartment harder. And fourth is the one that no one mentions because it's invisible, and this is missed appreciation. Real estate historically goes up in value over the years. If you default, you don't just lose what you put in, you lose every dollar of equity and growth that unit would have generated for you if you'd been able to close and hold. So when you add it all up, deposit, damages, bankruptcy, bad credit, missed appreciation, I'll just lose my deposit is almost never how this actually plays out. Now, I want to be really clear about why I'm telling you all of this. It's not to scare you into paralysis. It's to scare you into action, early action. Get legal advice now. A real estate lawyer can look at your specific agreement and tell you exactly what your notice and cure provisions look like, what your real exposure is, and what your realistic options are. This conversation costs you far less than finding out the hard way. And you can also check out my other video that goes into detail about the other real options you have when trying to close your pre-construction purchase. The link is in the description. If you've been quietly worried about an upcoming closing and hoping it'll somehow disappear, don't wait for the due date to arrive. For real practical guidance, head to condomillionaire.com and we can talk through your specific situation. It's free, it's confidential, and going in informed is always better than finding out the hard way. I'm Kyle, and I'll see you in the next video. And